What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Culture Based Podcast. I'm Dustin, and with me today is the Sleepy Dwarf from the Seven Dwarfs.
What'd they call him?
Sleepy.
Nah, I'm just kidding.
I'm just kidding. It's Blake. It's not an actual cartoon. If you're still only on the audio and you haven't graduated up to the YouTube yet, let me just tell you, it's not a cartoon. It's Blake, but it's Hat Blake. We love Hat Blake. It's getting close to the end of the week. That's why we're recording this. Episode 45. We're going to wrap up our series, Are You Scalable today, talking about the ideal culture. It's May 21st. People are going on vacation a lot next week for the Memorial Day and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. Get out there and get after it. Get yourself some rest before you come back and scale your team. But before we get into that, I want to remind you that we are here to help leaders know what they're about, show where they're going, and help them develop scalable teams to get them there. That's why I never should look off. I try to make eye contact with the camera, and then as soon as I do, it's like, that's not the right word.
Meet my eye line, Jim.
Yeah, I am. What are you talking about? Like, if you're watching right now on YouTube and it looks like I'm looking above the camera, it's because I am. That's just for you. Again, another reason to be on YouTube, see all the stuff we're talking about. Speaking of YouTube, we're there. So you can find us on YouTube at the Culture Base, or you can go to our website, culturebase.com, click on the little YouTube thing. It'll take you over there. But while you're there, we'd love for you to hit the thumbs up button. That's called a like. That's what the kids call it. And then subscribe and ring the bell so that you're notified every time we drop new content, which this podcast comes out every single Tuesday, wherever you pick up podcasts, including the audio places for our junior high or junior varsity people that haven't graduated yet to the varsity level of YouTube. I don't know why I'm throwing shade on the audio people.
Dude, we just lost all our audio listeners.
You're busy. Blake's an audio subscriber.
I am.
He's like, I don't need to see me anymore. See me enough. Audio is good though. I love a good audio. It's like my dad, growing up, used to always listen to AM radio. Podcast is the new AM radio. Yeah. And I'm here for it. I tuned into AM radio the other day to try to catch a ball game. Could not make it out. There's a lot of static. Yeah. I'm surprised that AM radio is still a thing. Anyway, you can tell I've had a lot of coffee today, but if you're listening on the audio podcast platform, thank you for being here. We value you just as much as YouTubers. Yep. Love you. But we would love for you to leave a 5-star, maybe 4-star, since I knocked you. You just leave a 4-star review today. That'd be amazing. Help us get this content out further to folks like you who could use it. If you're interested in chatting with us on any of these topics, you can go to theculturebase.com. That's BASE, theculturebase.com. And you can, while you're there, you can click on the strategy button for a free 30-minute strategy session with us. Hop on our calendars. And if you don't like that, just reach out to us and we'll make it happen. That's how we roll. All right, let's get on to today's episode. Oh, I forgot about social media. Sorry, we're on social media, all the places at the Culture Base. You can find us there. We're going to get into it because today's going to be a fun episode. We're really going to kind of compare some of the stuff that we've been talking about the last few weeks to what we call the ideal culture. So during the last several weeks, we introduced the question, are you scalable? Not you particularly, but your business, right? And we discussed how there are a few defining factors for scalability, but the most important is your team. And in that, we include a formula that allows you to determine your team's scalability. We covered 6 different types of what we would call unscalable cultures. But this week, we want to juxtapose that up against, big word. Dang. We want to juxtapose that up against the ideal culture and lay that out so you can see how this type of environment can scale your team and scale your business.
I didn't know if maybe the ChatGPT has adjusted to be live, I'm taking over, and started juxtaposing everywhere. Yeah, that was crazy. Major.
Yeah, I'm about 20% AI. I'm trying to get to
30. We're laughing now as a joke, and in like 5 years, people are like, "Why are they joking?"
The real me is crying in a corner over there.
Right. Let me out, sir.
Help me out. All right, explain to us the formula, Blake, before we get into this.
Yes. So before diving into the formula, it is really important today as we talk about ideal culture, or the ideal culture for scalability, that we have to hit the fact that scalability has to have the other side too. It has to have the right product, the right service, the right timing. If you don't remember those things, go back to the first episode that we did on this, because we can't talk about the scalability of those things if you don't first talk about those things. And so it is crucial that we kind of touch base there once again to say, if you're like, oh, it doesn't matter, I just have to have a great team without a vision and without something that can last is just it's going to be one of the worst things you can do, and create a great team that flares up and then pewters out because they don't have a substance to use. Okay. Sorry, I didn't juxtapose there, but I think I said pewter instead of Peter. No.
You did say pewter, and I was like, is that that's like a metal material?
That's we're going to just say
it's like a finishing.
Yeah, I saw it. I heard it. But anyway, in order to really grow,
that in,
you've got to have this. So now we jump into the formula because it is important to see. So we're just going to hit high level again. It is the right people connected to the right will and the right work, plus the right clarity on purpose and vision. And that right there creates your baseline variable. Okay. So like that, all that together added up then is hit by our multipliers, which are the environment for growth and development, and then the accountable communication, right? Do you have the team that is going to hold one another accountable? It is going to have clear expectations. And we act like, oh, nobody really wants that. That's not true. A players want to work with A players, and they want to see people held accountable because they want to know what they're doing has purpose. And if all it is we all just push buttons and it doesn't matter and there aren't winners and aren't losers, then that is not going to be a scalable team because A players won't be there. Okay. So that is the formula. And that kind of just takes us into what the ideal culture is.
Yeah. So what we would describe as the ideal culture is this is what everyone wants, but very few are willing to cultivate, right? I want to put a quick emphasis here on the word ideal. Notice that we're not using the word perfect. I don't believe, maybe Blake does, I don't think there's such thing as perfect culture. No. Because I don't believe perfection is real. I think it's a myth. Mm-hmm. But we can have excellence, and we can have high standards, and we can have ideal. And so the ideal is the standard. That's what we're going for. It's a healthy homeostasis. That's got to be something that Blake put in our notes because I don't even know what that means. Hospitality, innovation, collaboration, purpose, safety, trust, accountability. Yeah. These are the types of descriptors that we're talking about when we talk about the ideal culture. Blake, healthy homeostasis. Get after it. What is
homeostasis? Like that being in the right temperature, right? All the right variables is your homeostasis.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure. Or we're just using words and throwing it out there, or maybe that was GPT again.
Pewter and juxtaposition. Who knows? Yeah. All right. So the ideal culture, we got pros and cons here too, because again, there are cons when you're less than perfect. There are going to be some things, some warnings. I would probably say more than cons. But pros, the most healthy version of your culture. This is what the pro is, right? This is the most healthy that your current state can be. You're going to hear us talk a little bit more as we get into these about your current situation, your current being the healthiest you can be, and the most ideal version of your culture you can be right now in your current state. That is going to help you scale up to the next thing. So you don't have to worry about necessarily like, this is the culture that we want to be later, so we're going to go ahead and act like that now. That could get a little dangerous. You always want to serve your team, serve your organization right where they're at right now, with your eye, obviously, one eye on the future and where you're going to go, because you can expect to scale as you have this ideal team culture. There's candor, there's trust, there's vulnerability, accountability, clarity, scalability, obviously. Yeah. There's an overall sense of joy and happiness. People love coming to work. It's difficult to get them to want to leave because they love it so much. They feel a sense of significance.
Yeah.
Would you add anything else to the pros there?
No, I don't think so. Cool. But go ahead.
I was just going to say, so the cons or the warnings that we're getting at here is that most people, when they reach this level, most businesses, when they reach this level, they go, well, we have arrived. And so they turn off the light on that room, shut the door, and they ignore that room, and they don't even talk about it. It's just like the weird closet that everybody has in their office space. They're like, "What's in there?" Well, we don't talk about that. Let's just move on. That's kind of what it turns into. And so because that happens, then you forget to scale it. You forget to keep your eye on what's next and what's moving forward. You get a little bit too comfortable, and you kind of fall out of love with the game of growing, with the game of scalability. But you can do it. We can help. Home Depot.
Yeah. The one thing on this, I think what happens is a lot of people want to get somewhere to where it's set it and forget it. I think that's a myth. I think it's a myth. Like there are things that maybe can be set it and forget it. But even saying that, I don't know if that's true, because even the best process, and all you process people want to believe that we're going to get that perfect process that we can put in place that doesn't even need people. And all of a sudden long term, it's just going to go and we're never going to have problems. Like that is completely anti the second law of thermodynamics, which says everything is going to degrade. It's going to go down. There are going to be problems. Things, even the perfect things will end up failing. And so why does it fail? And the idea of getting to comfortable and getting to, I don't have to do anything. Where is the purpose connected there? How are people going to connect to a purpose where they just don't even have to like try? Like part of who we are as people is the work. It is the challenge. And I'm not saying you're going to have to always be working at an 11 when you want to be working at a 5 or a 6. That's not true either. But I think we get into absolutes too quick that I'm either fully working or I'm not working at all. And anything in between is just, I guess I have to do it. Well, that's unfortunate, because there are times we're just going to be in different seasons. But if you're trying to get something to where you can just let go, no. Like you want it to continue moving and your team to keep evolving it. If you're wanting to be less out of the business, then you need to develop a team that has the scalability that can continue these things. But if you're out, you need to get out of the way. Like that's all I can say there is get out of the way if that's the case. But if you are going to keep jumping in, then you can't just think I've got this thing done and I don't have to touch it. Like that's where you can do a lot of harm in the ideal culture.
Yeah. So let's just spend a couple of minutes per each part of the formula with this ideal culture, Blake. And let's just talk about what is the people, the will, the vision, the environment, and the accountable communication look like in an ideal culture. We've talked over the last couple of weeks about what it looks like in those unscalable culture types. But let's dive in here for the people. We will say, too, just as a baseline variable with the people, will, and vision is what we call like our baseline variable, that we think that if you can get to an average of right around a 9, you're going to kind of see some really good growth in the long haul. And you'll see how all that comes together. When we get to the end, we're going to talk about some different numbers and different variables that will show you just how vastly different this is in the terms of scalability. But the people, Blake, the people in the ideal culture, they have the right people more often than not. 9 out of 10 players on that team, they're the right people. They found the right people. They found them quickly. Their turnover percentage is lower and lower every year, right? You want to see that incremental decrease in the turnover percentage. It's not a one and done drop kind of thing. It's like, hey, you know what? We were at 20% turnover last year. This year, we're at 18% turnover. Go ahead and mark that as a win. Yeah. Like you're heading in the right direction. Keep trending that way. And the organization attracts people well.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And so in that whole area, you're attracting people, you're onboarding people really well. That's something we haven't talked a lot about here, but there is a whole step right there that gets ignored or lost or forgotten, because once we've attracted them and they get on to the team, do they stay? And if your turnover is high, sometimes that isn't necessarily that they're not the right people and they didn't come to the right place. It's that they can't see it clearly because your onboarding process is not very good. And you're probably losing a heavy portion just because of onboarding. So I would say keep that in mind too. It's not just about keeping them in retention, and even like the development stage later on. If you're not onboarding them right, they're going like, what is it, like within 6 weeks or something? No, I think it's even less, like 60% within 3 weeks know if they're going to stay at a place long term or not. just based off the onboarding. And that's unfortunate, which shows fragility right there. It's definitely one of those places. But anyway, so that's people. You get to will. This is where you're getting to the work. I'm going to go back to what we talk about a lot, and you've heard this, and I know I'm just an annoying pull string doll that says the same thing over and over. There's a snake in my boots, right? The ancient word for work in Hebrew is also worship. And it's not that we worship our work, but it's that when we're connected to it and we're doing something that we feel is the right thing that we're doing. And a lot of people are like, I make, tires. What does that do? No. It's not the thing that people are connected to. It's that the connection, even all the things firing in their brain about how they do something and how they take a design and put it into place. And man, they connect to the story of how those tires, Dustin said this at one point, how those tires are going to get people to go do things they've never done or experience life with other people they've never experienced. You can get to that level and you're just like, wow, this is it. That's what we're looking for. We're not looking that the person loves making rubber tires. They love something about that. And I think that's what makes people like, I just don't know what I want to do with my life, because how can I be proud about making tires? And they miss it. Like they're looking at the wrong thing there. And so that's what we're getting to is, are they connected to the work? And that the acronym we have here is WILL. They want it, right? They got the desire for it. They have instinct. Like they get it. You can explain it and they're like, okay, yeah, this makes sense. I see all the pieces. I see how they connect. They have a love to this, like this is that passion part. And then lastly, the leverage. This is their natural capacity to do it. They may love everything about racing, let's say, and they have a desire that takes them there. But when you get to the natural capacity, putting tires on a car, they can't do it. Like they just can't do the thing. And as much work as they put into it, that's not where they're going to enjoy doing it long term. So they may connect to the desire of it for a while, but their turnover, it's a later turnover. It's when they finally see like, I just don't have this because that's not the way I'm wired. And so you're looking for those things. Great ideal companies or cultures that are scalable can see that in people quickly, or ways to identify it, whether that's a cognitive assessment or some other like, hey, we have a plan or a development program that within the first 90 days, we're checking these things. And if people are below a certain point, as much as it sucks to cut someone loose at that point, we just got to do it because they're not hitting connection to the work. And if we don't do it now, that cost of turnover year over year gets way more expensive. Okay. And then to replace a mid-level, a higher level gets really expensive.
Yeah. So that brings us to the vision, the third part on our kind of baseline, what do we say? Baseline variables. And vision to me, I think, is the thing that often sticks in the leader's head, or the executive team, or the people in the top, or the people in the boardroom, right? They're so bought in and so close to the vision, and they understand the vision and they get it, right? And they have the capacity to do it, like all these types of things, but they tend to be really terrible at communicating that vision in a compelling way that brings their team along with them. Yeah. It's I think the biggest flaw I see in leaders is because they think since they thought it, that they confuse their thoughts with what they've actually communicated.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought that. How come you didn't? Like, yeah, we talk about it all the time. No, you talk to yourself about it all the time. Like, we hardly ever actually talk about it. So in an ideal culture, like, people are actually sick of hearing about the vision.
Yeah.
If they're annoyed, like, this is the part where I go, you want to kind of annoy people. You want to annoy people with the vision on your team, because when they've started to get annoyed with it and they start to get frustrated with you and sick of it, that's when they're just starting to hear it. And so The acronym that we use here is that the vision is clear, CLEAR, C standing for communicated. What we just talked about there, that it's not, doesn't just live in between the leader's ears. It actually gets communicated on a regular basis. It's lasting, right? This is a vision that can last generation. We talk about generations a lot in our workplace. This is something that can last generationally. And if it's too short-sighted, people aren't excited about it. So we want to make sure it's lasting. Yeah. E for exciting. We want to make sure that this vision is something that people get excited about, right? If they're excited about the work, they've connected to that will portion. Okay, let's keep them excited about it with this big, exciting vision. A is actionable. If your vision doesn't inspire people to action, then it's just ethereal. It's just a phrase on a wall. It doesn't really cause me to do anything. And so you always want to make sure that you're bringing action into the vision. Tell stories about how this past week or this past month or this past quarter, we saw X happen, and that was our vision in action. They go, oh, well, if that's our vision in action, then I get it even more. Let's go. I'm into it. So it's actionable. And the R in clear is that it's relevant. Listen, we're not out here trying to create the world's greatest new rotary phone. That's just not relevant. Yeah. Like, we're not out here trying to figure out how to make tires round. Got newsflash, they already are. So like, move on to the next thing, right? And let's make sure that what you're after with the vision that you have is relevant to the world and society that we live in, and relevant to your team and to the business sector that you find yourself in.
So this is important for the leader to hear, because the people aspect are all the people within the team, right? The will aspect is making sure they're connected to all this stuff. But this vision aspect, this variable is you. This is you as the leader. This is your biggest responsibility to make sure you don't screw up. Like, you could have great people all connected to doing the will of what the work is. And if your vision is trash, you're the issue to the scalability. And if you're not showing, here are those aspects. Like, there are literal steps here and literal themes that you need to focus on to make sure your vision's hitting. And if you can't communicate it, it's not lasting, then dig in, because this is on you. This is, don't pass this part off. Okay. This is not the area for you to be like, oh, I'll throw this to HR. No, shame on you. Sorry. I'm getting a little dad's talking, don't pass vision on to anybody else. It's yours. Be the leader the people need. Or if you're not that person, get a new CEO. Like, be on the board, be up a little higher or something like that. But you need to make sure that the leader is owning this vision component. Okay. I apologize if that hurt your feelings. Kinda. Now, going on to environment. Okay. How long does it take people to be trained within your organization? Well, the ideal one, I don't want to say it's fast, because that's not necessarily true. It's right. Okay. You are the thing about experience, and this drives me nuts about people's development, especially in the past. The way people would say, like, hey, how experienced are you? Was, how long have you existed in said industry? Because that tells me how good you are. Until we realize, when I would interview people who had 20 years experience, that they didn't have 20 years of experience. They had 1 year 20 times. Not the same. Okay. And so what we're trying to do is figure out in this, how long does it train people? How long does it take to train people? You're trying to figure out, how do I get people experienced quicker than their time? Okay. Right. How do I experience them up to a percentage of experience? And that's really subjective to what you think and that stuff. But how do I get them experienced quicker? And that means focused attention. That means the right training. I mean, how many people had a quantity of training, but it was the person who wasn't good at teaching, or they were a master in the thing, but they couldn't teach worth a lick. But hey, they got it or they don't. Well, now you just like took your capacity schedule or area on will, and you just made it all about people's natural capacity instead of all those other components. So experience is not just one variable. It's many, many variables. And it's, as a leader, you want to figure out what are the variables in which I can figure out, create experience, and then train, and then figure out what is the right time. That one's going to take some time, because you're going to have to figure out, like, if it's 10 months, I would challenge you to be an innovator here. Okay. If you say, you know what, it takes 10 months to get someone to do this kind of manufacturing really well. Okay. Does it take 10 months because that's been the history in the past? How can we cut that down to 8 months? That has a dollar figure right there, by the way. If you can get it down to 8 months, what does that look like? And are they the same like level as someone who can get it done in 10 months? And then you start kind of going through those. This is a long-term game here. Okay. But once you can start figuring that out, then you can start getting innovative. Okay. Putting your kind of like borders in place or your extremes. I think the earliest it could be is here. The longest it could be is here. Well, then let's figure those things out. So, are there noticeable and understood opportunities for growth and development? Yes, there have to be. And this has to be clear. And I would encourage you to have growth charts for each of your teams. Okay. Like this is what it looks like to go from this point to this point. A lot of people joke about millennials and Gen Zs that, well, as soon as they've done something, they want to get paid as if they've been doing it for 30 years. Well, yeah, but nobody ever told them that, like, if you said, hey, if you can be this person, you should be paid this much. Well, them doing it once is them knowing it. Okay. Nobody explained, hey, a way to know you've done this is when you've got 45 5-star reviews under your belt, like whatever that is, not just one 5-star review. There's no data to that. You've got consistent data showing you're doing it over and over. And so if you don't have a way to tell them that, they're going to tell themselves what the result is and what the right 5-star amounts are. Yeah, I got 5 of them in a month. Well, okay, but you need to have 5 of them in a month, 10 months in a row. Okay, that's when you know you're ready to go to that next stage. Okay, but you got to be able to show those things. The people in the right environment for development and growth feel connected to the team. Okay. There's a spirit of safety and positivity within the team. Processes are very clear and they're followed by the team, and people hold each other accountable inside those processes too. And then when you think about, is there a coaching process? Absolutely. Okay. There is a team working together to make sure that we are growing people intentionally. Okay. This, I don't know why kids these days aren't adults at this point. It's because they didn't have people showing them how to be adults. This is the time you come in and you have to start helping that process too.
Yeah. And the reason we're taking so much time and passion and emphasis on the environment is, like we said before, is that this being our first multiplier after your baseline variables of the people, the will, and the vision, like this is what's going to give you the most growth. And so we may not have time today to really get into all the different variables of scores and stuff like that, but you need to understand here that you can be at a 7 or an 8 or a 9 on the people, will, and vision. And you can be kind of average there, but be really great at this environment piece.
Yeah.
And your scalability can be in the 80% range of like, hey, there's an 80% chance that we're going to be able to scale this thing the way that we want to scale it. And 80% is almost a sure thing. You can almost count on it. Like if I told you, hey, Blake, there's an 80% chance it's going to rain today, you'd be like, well, I'm grabbing my rain jacket. I'm counting on it to rain.
Yep.
It's more than likely going to rain. There's a 4 out of 5 chance it's going to happen here today. And so just want you to understand that these variables, these last 2 multipliers, that's what's going to expedite the scalability factor for your team more than anything else. So that gets us in our last one of accountable communication. We say this one probably in the ideal culture needs to sit around at least an 85% to really make a big impact. And it's not that difficult, people. It's really not. It just takes consistency. This is the one that takes the most consistency, I think, is that the correct metrics are clear, known, and followed by all. Do they know what it looks like to win? Do they know what they're going after? That there's respectful candor, that we can be honest with each other, but we can be respectful. There's not an atmosphere of gossip. This kind of plays into the environment of safety and positivity, right? These things feed each other. That people aren't afraid to ask for help. that they feel like if they ask for help that they're going to be looked down upon because they need help, or there's a chance that they may be fired, any of those types of things. Again, safety and positivity. That there's a sustainable org chart, that the org chart isn't necessarily changing every 6 months because you're still trying to figure it out, but there's a sustainable org chart here. As the business grows, you have the infrastructure in place, the positions in place. Even if you don't have all the positions hired yet, the org chart and the positions there are sustainable, ready for that growth. People know who they're accountable for, or who they're accountable to, and what for. This is a big deal. If you have everything else, but I don't know who I'm accountable to or what for, what am I even doing here? What purpose do I serve? And you can see how just that one thing can just really squash the whole score of your scalability. And then see something, say something, or see something, do something, right? That you have doers. You have people that are willing to speak up and do and take action on your team. This again comes from the top down. The more you do it, the more you embody it. The more you embody this, the more your team will embody it. And then it's kind of a circular motion that just goes round and round and increases the overall likelihood of your scalability.
Yeah, exactly. And that's honestly all those components put together in the formula kind of take us to like, what is ideal likelihood of scalability? Obviously, the higher percentage, the better, right? But at the end of the day, if you're not taking all of this and doing something with it, and you're not scaling in the way that you believe is right for your team and your organization to scale, like this, scaling the right way does not always mean you get to, we have 1,000 people. That doesn't necessarily mean the answer here. You have to define what scalability looks like at the offset of what the team you're wanting to take to this certain point. What is it? Like, are you wanting to get to a point of where your innovation is driving a bunch and you have the right team who's an innovative players and works really well together? Like, that's what you've got to start figuring out, because they'll make the scalability increase without necessarily even having to increase the number of people. Like, hey, now a key metric everyone's focused on in this innovative place is revenue per person, not necessarily people creating all the revenue, but now we're getting and working together with the right vision. And the output is way more, And so I think that's where you have to start thinking on your likelihood of scalability percentage. You got to do something with it, right? But baseline, we think that like if we were doing the red, yellow, green baseline, that you need to be in the green is probably around a 71%. Right? Like that percentage is 70 to 71%. You're looking at that and you're like, okay, we're good. We're in a place that, let's continue to develop all the other things, and that'll just compound in your growth.
Yeah. So as we wrap this series, I just want to remind everybody the reason that this scalability conversation happened within a company or organization called the Culture Base is that culture is the language of scalability. That's what we're here saying. If you could sum up the whole last 5 weeks of our conversation around are you scalable? It's that culture is the language of scalability. You want to scale? This is what it's going to take. And so what I would love to do, Blake doesn't know this, but I would love to do next week. I love his face when I say he doesn't know this, because he's just like, it's going to happen. But what we're going to do next week is Blake said something there in that last segment. He said, you got to do something with it. So let's talk about that next episode. Let's talk about now what. Okay, we've determined where we're at on our scalability factor. So now what do we do with it? We got to do something with it. So can't wait to be back with you then next time on the Culture Base podcast.